The word for you today, Monday, July 24th. Thinking outside the religious box. What does that mean? It means not to think just the normal, but step outside. And the person who did that best was Jesus. Jesus really set the world up on end. He would say, you have heard it said this, but then he gave us a new meaning. In Mark 2:17, it says, on hearing this, Jesus said to them, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus has just called Matthew, or sometimes he's called Levi, to follow him. He was a tax collector. The Pharisees, religious leaders of the day, would have said that there's no way he was qualified to be a follower, to be a teacher at all, because he was a tax collector. Tax collectors had bad reputations, usually for good reasons. Usually they cheated people out of money. The Pharisees were criticizing Jesus for the people that he hung around and the people he was eating with. You know, we've all heard the saying, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Well, that's what Jesus is saying here. Let's take a look. Let's take a closer look at this scripture passage in verse 16, the verse right before that. The Pharisees were not talking to Jesus, but they were talking to his disciples. When they said, when the teachers of the law who were Pharisees saw him, Jesus, eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And then Jesus responded. He responded with what verse 17. And he teaches us some things in this. First thing he teaches is that sin in another person is not a reason to avoid them. If that was the case, we'd have to stay away from all humanity, even ourselves. We're called to be light and salt to a dark world. And if we're just around good Christian people all the time, how can we make a difference in others? We need to be out in the world. We need to be out helping, be an example, and telling them about the gospel of Jesus. So a sin is not, just because somebody has sin in their life is not a reason to avoid them. Second thing, the Pharisees focused on what effect the sinners would have on Jesus. Jesus focused on what effect he would have on the sinners. We need to be sure that when we're with people who don't really want anything to do with Jesus, we need to be sure that they don't have an effect on us. We have several students getting ready to go to college. And one of the things that they need to be sure to do is not allow people with other religious beliefs to influence them, but they need to be sure that they influence those people that don't know Jesus. So we need to be willing to step outside the box and be around people who are not believers, but at the same time we need to be sure that we're doing the influencing rather than being influenced. Third thing he talks is just as the sick need a doctor, so sinners need help also. Jesus came to heal all of us of our sin problem. And the fourth thing, Jesus called the disciples not because they were perfect. Now, he called them in their weakness and called them in their sinfulness so that when they saw that they were accepted because of their sinfulness, they could reach out to others and not be condemning, not be self-righteous, but reach out in love to people and say, hey, listen, I was going down the same road you're going. Let me tell you what made a difference, and it was Jesus. It's not that we're better, it's just that I'm so much happier now because of Jesus. Do you want this happiness? We all are uniquely qualified to minister to people. You know why? Because we're all sinners. Every single one of us. We know what a sinner goes through because we're all sinners. It's kind of like a family, their son was riding a motorcycle. He crashed into his car and his gas tank exploded and he received some very severe burns. He was in the hospital. He begged his mother to let him die. The pain was so bad. He said, just let me die. Let me die. I want to die. And his mother wouldn't give up, and she'd had his friends come and have people talk to him, and she was getting very discouraged because he didn't want to live. He just wanted to die. One day, the door to the curtain to his room opened up, and there stood a man, very much deformed. You could tell he had been burned severely. She quickly grabbed the curtain, pulled it shut, She'd hoped that her son didn't see that, but he had. And he said, let him in. The mom was so afraid to let him man in that this is gonna push him over the edge for sure. The man came in, and as he talked to the boy, he gave him a reason to live. Yeah, you could see what he looked like. The boy knew what he looked like. He'd seen himself in mirrors. And he thought, what do I have to live for? Well, here's a man that was just as damaged as him physically. And the man was giving him all kinds of reasons about what he had to live for. The same way in our lives. We're sinners. We've sinned. We're talking to somebody who feels like God can't love me. He can't love me because of all the things I've done. Well, yes, he can. Because if he can love me, he can love you. Have a good day.